By the time the warning siren reached the lower decks of Kestrel's station, Commander Jonah Vale was already awake, already dressed, and already halfway down the steel ladder that connected the operations ring to the old machine bays below. The station always made strange noises at night. Pipes knocked, support braces groaned, vent fans rattled like loose teeth. Most of the crew learned to ignore it after a few months. Jonah never did. He believed a place talked before it failed, and Kestrel had been talking a lot lately. He landed on the grated floor, crossed the bay in 6 long steps, and stopped beside Chief Engineer Mara Sethe, who was kneeling in front of an open relay box with a wrench in one hand and a flashlight clenched between her teeth. "Tell me it's just another sensor ghost," Jonah said. Mara spat the flashlight into her palm and looked up at him with tired eyes. "I'd love to lie to you, Jonah, but I'm trying to become a better person." She pointed through the wide bay window. Beyond the glass, the black curve of the moon Harlow hung under a field of stars. And above it, silent and impossible, a fleet of 7 silver ships had appeared where empty space had been 3 minutes ago. They were long, narrow, and perfectly still like blades laid across the dark. Jonah felt the back of his neck tighten. "No jump flare," he murmured. "No drive bloom." Mara rose to her feet. "Whoever they are, they just parked a war fleet over our oxygen farms." Around them, workers were leaving bunks and maintenance posts, gathering in the corridor with half-buttoned jackets and grease on their hands. Kestrel was not a war station. It was a repair platform, a water refinery, a food lab, a docking spine for ugly cargo haulers and tired people too far from home to complain much. There were families here, mechanics here, children asleep in the spin habitat, and 12,000 colonists on the surface below, depending on the station to keep the moon alive one recycled breath at a time. Jonah reached for the wall comm and keyed a channel open. "Ops, this is Vale. Seal the civilian docks, bring the shield grid to standby, and wake every security officer we've got." A nervous young voice answered at once. "Commander, they're hailing us." Jonah looked at the ships again. "Put it through to the council chamber," he said, "and wake Governor Lynn." The council chamber had once been a cargo customs office, and it still looked like one. The table was old alloy. The ceiling lights hummed unevenly. One corner of the room was stacked with emergency water filters because nobody had found a better place to keep them. Governor Hannah Lynn arrived carrying her coat over one arm and anger already in her eyes. She was a small woman in her 60s with silver hair pinned back tight and a face that seemed carved out of patience and bad news. "If this is another tax dispute from the Inner Trade Office," she said, taking her seat, "I am too old to pretend I care." Jonah almost smiled. "Not taxes," he said. "Warships." That killed the room. The screen on the far wall flickered, then steadied. An alien face appeared, lean and pale blue, with black eyes like polished stone and a crown of thin metallic wires drifting behind his skull. He wore no armor, only a dark high-collared robe marked with silver geometric lines that shifted when he moved. When he spoke, his translator was calm, clear, and cold enough to frost steel. "I am Prefect Sar of the Continuum Accord. I will be direct because human emotional rituals waste time." Governor Lynn folded her hands. "Good, I dislike speeches." A pause. Jonah thought he saw annoyance flicker over the alien's face. "This station, this moon, and every structure within local orbit now fall under Accord supervision," Sar said. "You will surrender navigation control, mineral rights, and communications authority. In return, your population will be permitted orderly survival." Mara let out a soft laugh from the back wall. "Orderly survival," she repeated. "That's a pretty way to say chains." Sar ignored her. "You have one reason to comply. We understand your species remains irrationally attached to its origin world." The screen shifted. A second image opened beside Sar's face. Earth. Blue oceans, white cloud bands, familiar and terribly far away. Then a red targeting ring closed around the planet. The air left the room all at once. Jonah heard someone whisper, "No." Sar's voice never changed. "An Accord interdiction array now holds firing position beyond your outer defense lanes. Should this station resist, a single coded transmission from my flagship will authorize planetary sterilization. Your home will die before your local rotation ends. Consider this a gesture of diplomatic clarity." Mara cursed under her breath. One of the council aides started crying quietly and tried to hide it. Governor Lynn did not move for several seconds. Then she leaned forward and said, "You came all this way to threaten billions of people because you want a mining moon?" Sar's dark eyes narrowed. "Not a mining moon, a corridor. Your station sits on a gate route that shortens fleet transit by 9 days. This is not personal, it is efficient." Jonah finally spoke. "If it's not personal, then why threaten Earth?" Sar turned to him. "Because humans will endure hardship for themselves, but not for symbols. Your psychology is well documented. You yield when the cradle is threatened." Jonah stared at the image of Earth, at the red ring around it, and felt something settle deep inside him, something heavy and hard and very old. Not fear, not exactly. It was the same feeling he had seen on faces during reactor fires and hull breaches, the moment when panic burned away and left only a decision. "You made a bad mistake," he said. Sar's expression did not change. "No, Commander Vale, I made the correct calculation." Jonah glanced at Governor Lin. She gave the smallest nod. He understood. No begging, no shouting, no surrender, not yet. Then here's my answer, Jonah said. You don't get Kestrel, you don't get Harlow, and you sure as hell don't get Earth. Sar studied him for a long moment, as if measuring whether this was courage or stupidity. You have 1 hour to reconsider, he said. After that, I begin removing your ability to choose. The screen went black. Nobody spoke until the hum of the ceiling lights became loud again. Mara was the first to move. She planted both palms on the table. He thinks threatening Earth will make us fold, she said. Governor Lin stood slowly. And let us educate him. Jonah looked through the chamber window toward the station's spine, where workers were already running toward posts, where warning lights were turning the corridor walls red, where people who fixed pumps and packed food and taught children were becoming something harder because they had been given no other choice. He touched the comm at his wrist. All sections, he said, his voice carrying across the station. This is Commander Vale. We are now under hostile demand. Lock every hatch, cut all non-essential power, and send every department head to command. They threatened Earth. He paused, hearing the silence on the channel, feeling the whole station listening. That was their biggest mistake. The station changed in less than 10 minutes. Civilian corridors that usually smelled of soup, machine oil, and recycled air now carried the sharp metal scent of emergency bulkheads sealing shut. The soft white ceiling strips went red. Cargo drones stopped mid-route and locked themselves to the floor. The long spine windows dimmed to combat opacity, turning the stars outside into faint ghosts. Commander Jonah Vale stood at the center of Kestrel's command deck while voices crashed over each other from every station. Dock 3 is sealed. Surface elevator is asking for priority clearance. 2 transport captains want to run for open space. Tell them no, Jonah said. If they leave now, SAR will read it as panic and start shooting at anything that moves. Governor Hannah Lin stood beside the main hollow table with her coat finally on and her reading glasses low on her nose. She watched the room with the cold focus of someone sorting blood types after an accident. Put the civilian channel on internal only, she said. No rumors to the surface. We tell Harlow what we know when we know it. Chief Engineer Mara Sethai came through the opposite hatch carrying a tablet under one arm and a grease stain across her jaw. I checked the shield grid myself, she said. It's stable enough to stop debris, maybe a few warning shots, but not fleet-grade fire. If SAR decides to carve us open, this station won't last. A silence followed that nobody liked. Jonah looked at the tactical display. The 7 alien ships had shifted formation. 1 remained above the oxygen farms. 2 had moved to cover the shuttle lanes. The others spread wide, not attacking, just sitting there like a hand around a throat. He wants us alive, Jonah said, at least for now. Mara gave him a tired look. That is not comforting. It isn't supposed to be. Jonah turned to the comm pit. Lieutenant, patch me to all department heads. A woman with cropped hair and shaking fingers nodded and opened the line. Jonah took one breath. Listen carefully. We are not in a battle yet. We are in a hostage situation with 12,000 civilians under us and 1 Earth over our heads. Nobody acts alone. Nobody plays hero. Every choice from this point forward either keeps people alive or gets them killed. So if you have an idea, you bring it here, and if you have fear, you carry it while you work. He released the switch. No speech followed, no applause, just people moving faster. The first argument started 3 minutes later. It began with Captain Elias Ward of Station Security slamming his palm against the hollow table. We hit them now, he said. Before they tighten the noose, we still have 6 rail turrets, 2 customs cutters, and a fuel yard full of things that explode. Mara rounded on him. And then what? He pushes one button and Earth dies. Ward's jaw flexed. He was a broad man with an old scar under one eye and the permanent expression of someone who trusted a locked door more than a speech. Maybe he's bluffing. Governor Lin answered before Jonah could. You don't build policy on maybe. Ward looked from her to Jonah. So we do nothing. No, Jonah said. We do the harder thing. We learn what parts of his threat are real, what parts need proximity, and what parts keep it alive. Nobody threatens Earth by magic. Mara threw her tablet onto the table and brought up a signal map. Thin lines pulsed between the alien flagship and a cluster of far-range dots near the edge of the system. He told us more than he meant to, she said. If that interdiction array needs a live coded transmission, then the firing chain depends on constant authentication. That means a relay, that means a handshake, that means latency matters, Ward frowned. Say it like I fixed doors. Mara stabbed a finger at the map. It means if his fleet really can burn Earth from here, the order has to travel through something. Ships, buoys, quantum nodes, I don't care, but anything that carries a signal can be broken, delayed, or fooled. Jonah leaned over the table. Can we jam it? Not with station hardware, Mara said. He'd overpower us in seconds. Can we hide inside the noise? She hesitated. Maybe. Kestrel's old maintenance grid still uses hardline pulse routing in the outer truss. Nobody touches it because it's ugly and half the manuals are missing. But if I can wake the dead sections, I can flood local bands with enough industrial garbage to make close scanning miserable. Ward folded his arms. Miserable doesn't save Earth. No, Mara said, but miserable buys time, and time is the only currency we've got. A chime sounded from the lower deck feed. One of the station teachers appeared on the side screen with 3 children behind her, all wrapped in blankets even though the habitat was warm. "Commander," she said, trying to keep her voice level, "the students saw the lights outside. They know something is wrong. What do I tell them?" Jonah stared at the kids for half a second too long. One of them, a little boy with sleep-swollen eyes, was clutching a plastic model of the original colony lander. Jonah thought of Earth again, of oceans none of these children had ever seen, of a threat hanging over a world some of them only knew from classroom maps. "Tell them the station is working," he said. "Tell them the adults are busy being difficult." The teacher gave the smallest smile. "We can do that." When the screen went dark, nobody in command spoke. Then Governor Lin said quietly, "The surface will need water forecasts within the hour." Jonah nodded. "Send revised ration plans, cut all decorative lighting, suspend non-essential gravity in cargo sectors, and shut down the public garden pumps." A young logistics officer looked horrified. "The hydroponics deck?" "Yes," Lin said. "If we lose the station, flowers will not save us." Another alarm pulsed. "Incoming message," the comm lieutenant said. "Not from SAR, civilian maintenance sector." Jonah accepted it. The feed jumped to an old woman in coveralls standing in a pipe corridor with steam rolling behind her. "Commander, this is Annika from Truss Maintenance," she said. "If you're lighting up dead grid lines, don't use line 14 through 16. We patched those with hand-wound copper after the meteor strike last winter. Push too hard and they'll melt right through the wall." Myra turned fast. "Those lines still exist." "Because I refused to sign the retirement order," Annika snapped. "Ugly hardware still works." Jonah saw Myra's eyes sharpen. "Bad repair, old copper, hardline pulse routing nobody respected, small, crude, easy to overlook." "Annika," he said, "stay where you are and pull every schematic you have." Ward noticed the change in his face. "You've got something." Jonah kept watching the maintenance feed. "Not yet," he said, "but I think SAR made another mistake." Outside the dimmed windows, the alien ships tightened their ring around Kestrel Station, patient and certain, while inside the old human machinery began to wake up with a low, angry hum. Annika arrived in command, still wearing one scorched glove, and carrying a bundle of cracked plastic schematics under her arm like holy scripture rescued from a fire. He dropped them onto the hollow table, shoved Mara's glowing signal model aside, and stabbed a nicotine-stained finger at a faded maintenance grid drawn 20 years before Kestrel had children on its civilian decks. "There," she said, "line 14 through 16. Nobody uses them because they're ugly, manual, and mean." Mara leaned in. "Manual how?" "No smart routing," Annika replied. "No self-correction. No station AI smoothing the pulse. They're hard copper, hand-patched after the strike, and noisy as hell. You push a clean signal through them, it comes out dirty." Captain Ward frowned. "Dirty doesn't win wars." "Maybe not," Jonah said, studying the old map, "but dirty might ruin somebody's lock." Governor Lin adjusted her glasses and looked at Mara. "Can those lines touch the outer truss?" Mara's eyes were already moving ahead of the question. "Yes, they run under maintenance skin all the way to the abandoned relay spine near Dock 9. If we wake them fully, they can spit industrial chatter straight into local space like a rusted old radio tower." Ward folded his arms tighter. "And if SAR notices?" Mara looked at him. "Then we act like a station full of overworked mechanics trying to keep the lights on, which for once will not be a lie." Jonah tapped the table once hard enough to settle the room. "Do it. I want every dead line mapped, every patch point checked, and every frequency profile you can squeeze out of those copper scars. If SAR's firing chain needs a clean handshake, we make this orbit filthy." Annika gave a grim little smile. "Now you're speaking maintenance." The station split into 2 kinds of motion after that. One kind was visible. Shutters sealing, med bays filling emergency packs, security teams moving rifles from lockers to corridor posts, civilians lining up at ration windows with quiet fear and questions nobody could answer. The other kind was hidden in the walls. Mara took Jonah and Annika down through maintenance shafts, so narrow the commander had to turn sideways to squeeze past coolant pipes and old cable trunks wrapped in faded hazard cloth. The deeper they went, the older Kestrel became. New alloy gave way to scarred steel. Touch panels disappeared. Here the station still had hand valves, mechanical relays, and inspection plaques stamped with dates from the first years of settlement, back when every part had been hauled from Earth or fabricated by people who expected it to break and expected themselves to fix it. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Mara asked, slapping the side of a junction box that looked as if it had survived at least one explosion and possibly a religion. Jonah brushed rust dust from his sleeve. "You and I have different definitions of beauty." Annika barked a laugh. "That's because you people grew up with polished systems that apologize before they fail." She knelt beside an exposed bundle of copper, clipped 2 testing leads onto the hand wound patch, and watched the meter tremble. "Still alive," she muttered. "Mean as ever." Mara called up to the comm drone hovering behind them. "Bridge, feed me external scans of the Accord flagship. I want its local transmitter bloom isolated from the other 6. Static cracked in Jonah's ear. Then the lieutenant answered, "Trying, Chief. Their hull geometry is masking most of it." Try harder, Mara said. I'm crawling through a pipe older than your parents. Jonah crouched beside her. Tell me what you're building. Mara kept her eyes on the wiring. Not a weapon, not yet. A smear. If SAR's command signal needs to identify itself in real time, then it'll carry a repeating structure. Authentication always does. We can't break his code from here, but maybe we can make the environment so noisy his fleet has to narrow the beam and boost power. And when he does that, Jonah asked. Mara finally looked at him. Then we can see where the heartbeat lives. Jonah understood, not just interference, pressure, make the alien show which artery mattered. The first test went wrong fast. When Mara brought line 15 fully online, half the maintenance shaft vibrated like a struck bell. Sparks jumped from a relay cage, and one of the old copper wraps began to smoke. Annika Cursed smacked the emergency cutoff with her wrench, and the hum died with a sad metallic whine. That line is done, she said. One more push and it cooks itself. Mara wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her wrist. Then we work with 14 and 16. Jonah keyed his comm. Status topside, Ward answered this time, voice clipped and hard. SAR just moved 2 ships lower over the shuttle ring, and he sent us a package. What kind of package? A pause. A cargo pod, no drive signature, no weapon scan. It's drifting toward Dock 2. Jonah was already moving. Hold position. Nobody opens it until I get there. He hit the ladder hard, climbing out of the maintenance skin with Mara close behind him, and Annika swearing at them both for using her ladders like they were assault ropes. By the time Jonah reached Dock 2, the bay was sealed and full of armed security and pressure gear. The pod sat in the middle of the lock on cold skids, smooth black, no markings, no obvious seam. Ward stood with rifle in hand and the expression of a man who wanted very much to shoot first and hear wisdom later. You think it's a bomb? He asked. Jonah looked at the pod. If it were a bomb, he'd have aimed it better. Mara stepped around the security line and ran a scanner wand over the hull. Atmosphere inside, one life sign, Ward muttered. That is somehow worse. Governor Lin's voice came over the bay speakers. Commander, whatever it is, SAR wants us frightened enough to make mistakes. Please disappoint him. Jonah nodded once. Open it. The seam split with a hiss. Inside, under stark white light, sat a single human woman in a station flight suit, wrists bound, face bruised, eyes wide with shock. Jonah knew her instantly. Pilot Celia Voss, captain of the courier shuttle that had failed to check in 6 hours earlier on the far side of Harlow. She tried to speak, but the gag caught in her throat. Ward swore softly. Ara went pale. Taped to the inside lid above Celia's head was a small silver plate with one line of translated text etched into it. This is how precise we can be. Jonah stared at the message for one long second, then at Celia shaking in the hard white light, and when he spoke his voice was so calm that everyone in the bay turned to look at him. Get her to medical, he said, and tell the bridge to mark it down. Prefect SAR just made another mistake. Pilot Celia Voss woke angry, which Jonah took as a good sign. By the time he reached medical, she was sitting half upright on the cot with an oxygen line under her nose, one cheek purple with bruising, and a med tech trying without success to convince her to stay still. I was still in my own shuttle when they took me, she said before Jonah could ask anything. No warning shot, no boarding alarm. 1 second I was lining up for the far relay lane, next second my screens went white and my controls died. Governor Lin stood at the foot of the bed with her hands folded behind her back. Ow, Celia swallowed, winced, and pointed weakly at the ceiling as if the answer were still hanging there. Field snare. Fine enough I never saw it. They pulled me clean out of transit, reeled my shuttle in, and cut their way through the hull like they were opening a lunch tin. Captain Ward's face darkened. You saw their ship? Not much, Celia said. They hooded me fast, but I heard them. They were complaining. Myra stepped closer. About what? Celia gave a hard little laugh that turned into a cough. About us, about Kestrel. About the station being filthy. One of them said the local signal environment was uncultured. Another said the firing chain was stable only because the anchor was in place. Jonah looked at Mara. Anchor? Celia nodded. That word came up twice. I also heard one of them say, keep the station blind to Dock 9 and the lock will hold. I didn't know what it meant then. Myra's whole posture changed. She straightened so fast she almost hit the supply rack behind her. Dock 9, she said. The abandoned relay spine. Ward frowned. You think they planted something on us? I think they don't trust distance any more than we do, Mara said. If SAR wants a live authentication chain for Earth, then a local anchor makes perfect sense. Something close, something hidden in our own clutter to clean the handshake. Lin turned to Jonah. Can we verify it? Mara was already moving. If it's there, I'll find it. They found the first proof 10 minutes later, right as SAR made good on his promise to begin removing choices. His face appeared on every command screen without invitation, his black eyes calm, his voice almost bored. Your hour has expired, he said. I have selected a lesson small enough to preserve your station and painful enough to improve your judgment. Jonah lunged for the comm. SAR, don't. But the alien had already cut the channel. A second later, the tactical board flashed white. One of the 7 Accord ships rolled a fraction to port and fired a needle-thin beam, not at command, not at the shield grid, but at Farm 3 on the outer agricultural ring. The strike was so precise it looked almost gentle from the screen, just a line of blue touching glass. Then the whole algae dome burst outward in a glittering green cloud. Pressure alarms screamed across 3 decks. On the surface, Harlow's life support reserves dropped by 11% in a single heartbeat. Jonah felt the command deck tilt under him as if the station itself had flinched. "Seal the farm breach," he snapped. "Spin emergency shutters. Reroute every reserve line." "Too slow," a systems officer shouted. "Farm 3's gone. We're venting nutrient stock and half the oxygen culture with it." Ward was already barking into his channel. "Damage teams to outer ring. Medics to Dock 7. Move." Through the forward display, Jonah watched workers in hard suits push off into open space toward the shattered farm, tiny against the drifting emerald mist and broken glass. That was the moment the threat stopped being abstract. Not Earth on a screen, not a distant world in a red ring. This was their station bleeding in front of them. A hydro-tech named Louis Arendt died when a shard the size of a door went through his suit before the shutters closed. 2 others came back with vacuum burns and glass in their necks. Mara stood at the side console with Annika, teeth clenched, forcing life into the dead copper lines while the station shook around them. "Come on," she muttered at the readout. "Come on, you stubborn old beast." Annika slapped the relay housing with her wrench. "It worked before you were born and it'll work after you're dead, so stop begging and drive it." The waveform on Mara's screen jumped, smeared, then flared. Dirty burst rolled through the old maintenance grid and out across the abandoned truss work near Dock 9. Instantly, a ghost appeared on the scan, not a ship, not a pod, but a narrow silver spindle clamped along the blind side of the relay spine, masked against station debris and dead metal. Its signal profile was almost invisible until the old copper garbage hit it and forced it to compensate. Then it lit up like a vein under thin skin. Mara stared at the bloom. "There you are," she whispered. Jonah came to her side. "The anchor." "Yes," she said. "A local phase relay. He pinned it to our hull and buried it in our own shadow. That thing cleans his command stream before it leaves local space. It's the reason he can keep the Earth lock stable." Ward wiped blood from a cut on his temple and looked at the scan. "Then we shoot it." Mara shook her head. "Not from inside. If we hit it with station guns and miss, we blow Dock 9 off our own frame. If we hit it clean, SAR still sees the shot and may transmit before it dies." Governor Lynn stepped toward the table, voice low and flat. "So we need hands on it." Nobody liked how fast that settled the room. Jonah studied the silver spindle on the screen, the one ugly foreign thing hiding in the station's scars, and he could almost feel the line stretching from it all the way to Earth. "Manual cut," he said. "An EVA team goes out along the dead spine, reaches the relay, and kills it without giving SAR a clean warning." Ward's answer came at once. "Too exposed. His ships will see them." Mara shook her head again. "Not if we time it with the next copper surge and a station blackout on the outer hull. The old lines can flood his local sensors for a few seconds at a time. Ugly, noisy, irregular. Just enough to make a maintenance crawl look like system trash." Lynn's eyes moved from Mara to Jonah. "How many people?" Jonah did the math and hated every number. 2 on the hull, 1 inside to ride the surge timing. 1 backup in case the line burns out." Ward set his jaw. "I'm going." "No," Jonah said. "You stay here and keep order when this place starts shaking." Mara met his eyes. "Then I go." Jonah looked at the damage reports still crawling across the board, at the dead farm, at Celia's bruised face on the med feed, at the silver relay hiding on his station like a knife under a blanket. Then he made the choice he had been walking toward since SAR put Earth on that screen. "You and me," he said. "We cut it ourselves." Preparation took 9 minutes, which was 8 minutes longer than Jonah wanted and 3 minutes faster than any sane officer would have approved. Kestrel's EVA locker smelled like rubber seals, cold metal, and old fear. Aura stood on the prep platform with her dark hair tied back tight while a suit tech locked the chest plate over her undersuit. "If you say one inspiring commander thing right now," she said, not looking at Jonah, "I will open your visor and let vacuum do the paperwork." Jonah stepped into his own suit ring and raised both hands while the back shell closed around him. "That hurts because I had a truly excellent speech ready." Captain Ward checked the magnetic clamps on Jonah's gloves with enough force to make the commander's fingers ache. "You cut the relay, then you come straight back," Ward said. "No heroics, no improvising, no dying for principle." Governor Lynn stood just outside the prep line, coat still on, face set in that same hard calm she wore when bad news needed a spine. "You have 4 windows," she said. "Mara rides the old copper surge from inside timing. Every surge gives you 6 to 8 seconds of sensor garbage on the outer hull. After that, SAR sees movement." Annika's voice crackled over the internal suit channel from maintenance control. "And if line 16 burns through, you don't get a 5th window because I will be busy strangling the station." Mara glanced at Jonah as her helmet sealed. "Comforting team." Celia Voss, bruised but stubbornly upright in the bay doorway, lifted a hand. Dock 9's outer skin still has patched handholds along the spine. Use the old maintenance rail, not the clean truss. The clean path reflects too much light. Jonah nodded once. "Copy that?" Ward grabbed his shoulder before the airlock cycle began. "Jonah!" The commander turned. Ward's scar pulled tight under one eye. "Bring her back." Jonah understood exactly which her he meant. "I know," he said. The inner door shut. Pressure began to fall. The station's hum faded behind metal until only Jonah's own breathing remained, loud and close inside the helmet. Mara's voice came soft through the comm. "Still got that speech?" Jonah checked his cutter tool, tether reel, and backup line. "Saving it for when we don't die. Try not to make me wait too long." The outer hatch opened onto black space, and the ruined edge of Farm 3 hanging above them like shattered green ice. Kestrel's curves stretched away in hard angles and old plating, its civilian lights dimmed to wartime shadows. Beyond the station, the 7 Accord ships held position, silver and still, beautiful in the cold way knives were beautiful. Jonah pushed off first, boots catching the maintenance rail with a magnetic click. Mara followed, one gloved hand on the old spine, the other guiding a cable reel clipped between them. "Window 1 in 10 seconds, Annika said over comms. "And before either of you asks, yes, the copper is screaming." Jonah moved fast, but not cleanly. The old exterior route had been patched across decades with whatever Kestrel had available. Bolted scaffold bars, welded plate seams, emergency grip rings hammered into hull sections never meant to be walked. Human work, ugly work, real work, it kept them alive. The first surge hit. For one sharp instant, every sensor grid around Dock 9 bloomed with static. Jonah saw it on his wrist display, a cloud of dirty noise swallowing the local scan field. "Go," Mara snapped. They pulled themselves forward in practiced bursts, bodies low to the skin, moving over scarred metal and old repair welds while the relay spindle waited ahead, narrow and silver, almost elegant against the station's rough frame. Then the noise dropped. "Freeze," Annika warned. Jonah locked flat against the hull. One of the Accord ships shifted half a degree. A scanning beam passed over Dock 9, thin and pale. It slid across the dead truss, over a wrecked cargo bracket, over Jonah's left boot. He did not breathe. Mara's boot had hooked under a handhold 10 feet behind him, her body perfectly still. "Come on," Jonah whispered to the stars, though he was not sure whether he meant the beam or himself. The scan moved on. "Window 2 in 5, Annika said. "And if either of you scratches my station, I'll haunt you professionally." Mara laughed once, tight with nerves. The second surge slammed through. This time the noise was stronger, ragged enough that Jonah's display stuttered. They lunged for the spindle. Up close, the relay looked less like a weapon and more like a parasite. Its clamps had bitten into Kestrel's maintenance spine and sunk tiny anchor spikes straight through old hull plating. A faint blue pulse traveled along its surface in regular beats, each one impossibly precise. "Heartbeat confirmed," Mara said. "He tied the earth lock right into us." Jonah planted himself beside the spindle and tested the main housing with his cutter. The blade skated off the silver skin in a flare of sparks. "Armored? Of course it's armored," Mara muttered. "Why would the psychopath with a planet under a gun ever do anything the easy way?" Jonah scanned the mount points. 4 clamps, 1 feed node, 2 buried seams. "All clean, all hidden, all too careful. Can you spoof it from here?" he asked. Mara had already opened a service plate near the rear coupling. "Maybe for a second, not enough to own it. Maybe enough to blind it when we break the spine." "Window 3 in 7, Annika cut in, "and line 14 is heating up like a drunk stove." Jonah made the call. "Mara, flood the node. I'll hit the clamp roots manually." "With what?" she asked. Jonah pulled the emergency pry spike from his thigh mount, old station steel sharpened for jammed hatches, not alien relays. "With human maintenance." Mara actually smiled at that. "All right, Commander, let's be primitive." The third surge rolled out. Mara jammed her interface leads into the exposed coupling and forced a burst of garbage logic into the relay core. The spindle's blue pulse skipped. Jonah drove the pry spike into the first clamp seam and put his full weight behind it. The metal gave half an inch. Not enough. "Again," Mara said through gritted teeth. "The node is fighting me." Jonah tore the spike free and hammered it into the second seam. This time the clamp cracked with a sharp metallic report that traveled straight through his arms. Warning glyphs flashed across the relay skin. "It sees us," Mara said. "No," Jonah answered, striking the third seam. "Now it knows we're here." Somewhere beyond Dock 9, an Accord ship began to move. Ward's voice burst over comms from inside command. "Jonah Company. SAR just lit weapons on ship 4. "Then tell him to get in line," Jonah said. He ripped the spike free, reached for the final clamp, and that was when the relay changed. The silver housing split open like an eyelid, revealing a black inner core bright with blue light, and a pulse hit both their suits so hard Jonah's vision went white. Every display in his helmet died at once. The tether line snapped tight between him and Mara. In the dead dark of his visor, with only his own breath and the ringing inside his skull, Jonah heard Mara say one terrible sentence in a perfectly calm voice. "Jonah, it wasn't just a relay." For 3 full seconds, Jonah saw nothing at all. His visor stayed black, his HUD dead, his balance gone, and only the crushing pull of the tether line kept him from drifting off the hull into open space. Then emergency optics crawled back in a wash of dim green static, enough for shapes and motion, but not enough for comfort. Mara was still there, one hand locked around the exposed black core, The other braced against the maintenance spine while blue arcs danced over her glove. "Talk to me," Jonah said, voice harsher than he meant. Mara drew one hard breath. "It's a phase anchor and a dead man switch. If we rip it free, it sends a final authenticated burst on failure. SAR built it so anyone trying to cut the earth lock would trigger the earth lock." Jonah felt cold settle through him despite the suit heaters. "Can you stop it?" "Maybe," Mara said. "Not by breaking it. I'm making it believe the link is still alive while we strangle the output." Ward's voice slammed into the comm from command. "Ship 4 just left formation. It's coming around for line of sight on Dock 9. Governor Lin cut in right behind him. "You have less than 2 minutes before SAR has a firing window on the hull." Annika's voice followed, raw and furious. "And line 14 is one bad thought away from becoming plasma scrap. Whatever miracle you two are planning, please develop it fast." Jonah looked at the open black core pulsing between them. It was smaller than he expected, no bigger than a toolbox, and inside it he could see what looked like a braided crystal lattice wrapped around a spinning blue field. Neat, precise, fragile in the way a surgeon's instrument was fragile. Human tools, he thought suddenly, were built to survive anger. This thing was built to survive elegance. "Tell me what you need," he said. Mara's answer came instantly. "A hard loop, real metal, something stupid enough to confuse the phase balance." Jonah almost laughed. "You're describing this whole station." He turned, spotted the old hand-wound copper bundles running under the maintenance skin, and understood. "The patched lines." "Yes," Mara said. "If we shunt the anchor through Annika's ugly copper and force it to hold synchronization in a dirty analog loop, its output will choke on its own correction cycle. It'll keep the handshake alive locally, but the long-range burst will drown in noise." "Can the copper carry it?" Jonah asked. Annika answered before Mara could. "Carry it, no. Survive it, also no. But maybe for 10 seconds, and 10 seconds is enough to ruin somebody's perfect day." Ward broke in again. "Make it 8. Ship 4 just armed something mean." Jonah pushed off the hull, dragged himself 2 meters down the spine, and slammed an emergency access cover open with the pry spike. Beneath it sat a nest of old copper lines wrapped in hand-patched insulation and repair resin the color of dried blood. Human work. Scarred work. He tore free the thickest bundle and hauled it toward Mara while she jammed her interface leads deeper into the black core. "I hate this," she muttered. "That means it's probably right," Jonah said. He wedged the copper against the anchor node, but the live field spat it back in a burst of blue fire that scorched his glove and sent pain up his wrist. Mara cursed. "Insulate the outer braid, bare metal on inner contact only." "With what?" Jonah snapped. There was half a beat of silence before Celia Voss came over the channel from inside medical. "Commander, your suit patch kit. Left hip compartment. The thermal wrap is ceramic-backed." Jonah yanked the kit free, tore it open with his teeth through the helmet reflex even though the suit made that pointless, and wrapped the copper bundle in the white ceramic strip until only the jagged end remained exposed. "Trying again," he said. "Window?" "No more windows," Annika barked. "I'm not pulsing now, I'm flooding. I've crossed from engineering into insult." At once the space around Dock 9 filled with dirty static on Jonah's emergency optics, a shimmering snowstorm of industrial garbage boiling off the old spine. Somewhere out there an Accord scan beam flickered and lost coherence. Mara saw it too. "Now!" she shouted. Jonah rammed the copper into the anchor's exposed core. The black housing screamed. Blue light flooded the braid, then twisted red, where the old metal fought to carry what it had never been meant to carry. Back inside the station, every dead maintenance line woke at once. Kestrel shuddered from bow to stern like an animal bracing against a spear. On the command deck, alarms stacked so fast they merged into one continuous tone. Governor Lin did not blink. "Hold the station together," she said to no one and everyone. Ward planted both hands on the tactical rail. "SAR just lost clean telemetry on the lock. He's boosting power." Mara grunted in Jonah's ear. "Good, let him. The harder he pushes, the uglier this gets." Then SAR himself came onto the channel. No translator delay, no ceremonial calm, only pure controlled rage. "Commander Vale," he said, and Jonah could hear the strain under every word. "Step away from the anchor." Jonah kept both gloves locked on the burning copper. "No, you do not understand what you are touching." "That's funny," Jonah said. "I was just thinking the same thing about you and humans." On the hull, the copper bundle began to soften under the load. Insulation bubbled. The ceramic wrap split. Jonah smelled hot metal through filters that should not have let him smell anything. Mara's voice went tight. "The core is desynchronizing. Another few seconds." SAR's fury cracked. "If you continue, the feedback will cripple your station." "Maybe," Jonah said, "but Earth lives." For the first time since this began, the alien stopped sounding superior. He sounded desperate. "You would damage your own structure to protect a remote origin world." Jonah looked out into the black, past the silver warship turning toward them, past Harlow below, past all the distance between one frightened frontier station and the blue planet hanging at the center of a species' memory. "Yes," he said simply, "that is exactly what we would do." The answer seemed to hit SAR harder than sabotage. Mara shouted, "Now, Jonah!" He drove the pry spike down through the copper bundle and into the phase lattice itself. The crystal braid shattered with a flash so bright his emergency optics went blind again. A shockwave ran through the maintenance spine, into the patched copper, through Kestrel's old dead lines, and back into the anchor like a fist through glass. On the command deck, every accord signal near Dock 9 collapsed into static. The red firing thread tied to Earth vanished from the board. Ship 4's weapon charge died half-formed. SAR's channel cut out in a scream of torn bandwidth. Jonah's tether snapped hard as the crippled anchor blew free of the hull and spun off into space, trailing sparks. For one terrible instant, Kestrel went dark. Then the emergency grid came back in layers. Red lights, air pumps, command boards, human voices. Ward was the first clear sound over comm. "Target lock is gone," he said, stunned. Then louder, sharper, almost laughing with disbelief. "Earth is clear. Earth is clear." Mara sagged against the hull, breathing hard. Jonah reached out and caught her suit arm before she could drift. Behind them, the silver ship that had come hunting along Dock 9 broke formation and pulled back as if the dark around Kestrel had suddenly become dangerous. Jonah looked toward the stars, toward where SAR's perfect threat had just died in a nest of ugly copper and stubborn hands, and he said the only thing left worth saying. Told him it was a mistake.